The backyard was buzzing with that familiar forced cheerfulness that defined our family gatherings. It was for my Uncle David's 60th birthday, a man I once admired, and I was doing my best to become one with the wallpaper near the drinks table. At the center of it all, of course, was my cousin Kevin, the family's undisputed golden boy, who could turn a minor work update into a legendary tale. He was holding court, regaling his fan club of aunts and uncles with a story about a potential promotion at his marketing firm, a story I'd already heard 3 times. A new guest, clearly someone Kevin was trying to impress, glanced over at me. "And what about you?" she asked. Before I could even open my mouth, Kevin let out a loud theatrical laugh. He gestured towards me with a dismissive wave of his hand, a grand pronouncement coming. "Elaine? Oh, she's in IT. Super smart, you know." He paused for effect, letting the anticipation build before delivering the punchline. "She fixes printers, that's all." A few people chuckled, the sound sharp and ugly in the warm afternoon air. The worst part was what came next. My Uncle David, my father's brother and the man who taught me how to ride a bike, clapped Kevin on the back, beaming with pride. "Our Elaine," he announced, "keeps the world running, one paper jam at a time." He shot a wink at me, but it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like a verdict, a final confirmation of the small dusty box they had put me in years ago. It was just another tally mark on an internal ledger I'd been keeping my whole life. Then, everything changed. A sleek, black SUV, the kind you only see in movies, pulled up silently to the curb on the quiet suburban street. The party's cheerful music suddenly felt intrusive, and it started to fade as everyone turned to look. A man in a perfectly tailored black suit and a subtle earpiece stepped out of the passenger side. He scanned the confused crowd with an unnerving calm, his eyes moving past my uncle, past Kevin, and landing directly on me. He started walking forward with an undeniable purpose, straight towards my little corner by the drinks table. And as he started walking towards me, every eye in that backyard followed. The silence was deafening. My cousin's smirk was gone. This wasn't just a moment, it was the shattering of a story they had been telling themselves for 20 years. That man walking across the grass wasn't just interrupting a party, he was the physical embodiment of a truth I had spent 2 decades trying to ignore. To understand the earthquake that was about to happen, you have to understand the world as it was just 5 minutes before he arrived. It was a world built entirely around my cousin Kevin, the family's charismatic but utterly superficial golden child. Kevin sailed through college with a C average in business, but he had a black belt in schmoozing. He could sell sand in a desert. And to my family, that wasn't just a skill. It was a form of genius. I still remember the day he landed his first entry-level marketing job. My family popped champagne like he'd just been named CEO of a Fortune 500 company. They saw his charm as a promise, a glittering sign of the incredible future he was destined for, and they toasted to it with a reverence usually reserved for royalty. This stood in stark contrast to my own achievements, which were always met with a kind of confused silence. I remember a few years earlier, sitting in that same backyard, trying to explain to my aunt and uncle that I'd been awarded a full scholarship for my master's degree in cybersecurity and cryptography. I was so proud, my voice shaking with excitement. My Uncle David, bless his heart, just blinked at me over his beer. "Oh, that's nice, dear," he finally said, his tone dripping with paternal concern. "Just don't spend all your time with computers, okay? You need to get out more." The message was clear. My passion wasn't a career path, it was a quirky, antisocial hobby. My success wasn't something to celebrate, it was something to be managed, like a strange personality flaw. My Aunt Carol, a woman who mistook her son's dependence for love, and my independence for coldness, was the other half of this equation. Together with my uncle, they weren't malicious people, they simply worshipped at the altar of things they could easily understand: charm, flash, and easy success. They saw Kevin's effortless charisma as a divine gift, and my quiet, methodical dedication as a social failing. My world of complex algorithms and digital security was abstract and invisible to them. Because they couldn't see it, or perhaps because they didn't want to, it simply didn't count. It was easier for them to file my life under miscellaneous, and focus all their energy on the son who performed his success for them daily. Over time, they built a powerful false narrative to justify this imbalance. A story they told themselves and everyone else so often that it became family gospel. The narrative was simple. Kevin is the people person, he's destined for the spotlight. Elaine is the reliable one, the stable one. She's not a risk taker. This wasn't a description, it was a prescription. It was the role I was assigned. Being reliable meant I didn't need help. Being stable meant I didn't need encouragement or investment. This narrative wasn't about who we were, it was about what they needed us to be to make their favoritism feel like simple, practical parenting. It was a lie, but it was a comfortable one. This lie had real-world consequences, an entire internal ledger of them that I kept locked away in my head. I remember when Kevin, just months after getting a brand new sedan as a graduation present, wrecked it completely. There was no lecture, no discussion of responsibility. The only concern was for his image. He needs a reliable car for work, my Uncle David had declared solemnly, as if Kevin were a traveling diplomat. My uncle co-signed a loan for an even nicer model that very weekend. It wasn't about transportation, it was about maintaining the facade of the successful young professional. He was an investment, and his image was collateral that had to be protected at all costs. Just a year later, the contrast couldn't have been more painful. I needed about $2,000 for a specialized certification course, a crucial qualification that would open major doors in my field. When I tentatively asked if they could help with a small loan, I was met with a gentle, patronizing refusal. "Oh, Elaine, you're so good with money," my Aunt Carol said with a proud smile. "You can save that up in no time." My uncle added that it wasn't like I had a high-profile job where appearances mattered. The excuse was that money was tight, but I saw the truth plain as day. It wasn't about the money. They had just funded Kevin's ski trip to network. The real reason was that my success was quiet. It was invisible. It didn't come with a shiny new car or a fancy title they could drop at dinner parties, so it wasn't worth the investment. I became the responsible one because I was given no other choice. I learned to fix my own problems, fund my own ambitions, and celebrate my own victories in silence. I built my career from the ground up on a foundation of their neglect. For years I simply accepted it. It was easier than fighting, easier than pointing out the hypocrisy that was as clear as the sky above. I thought that if I just worked hard enough, if I became successful enough, maybe one day they would finally see me. Maybe they would finally understand that my quiet world was just as important as Kevin's loud one. It was a fool's hope, I know. It was the quiet prayer of the invisible child, hoping to one day be seen. That's why my uncle's comment at the party cut so deep. Keeps the world running, one paper jam at a time. It wasn't just a bad joke. It was the final crushing summary of my entire existence in their eyes. After all the work, all the sacrifices, all the silent achievements, this is all I was to them. A fixer of small, insignificant things. The reliable, unapplauded background character in the grand, exciting story of their golden boy. I had spent my entire life being the family's reliable, invisible cog. The printer fixer. I had accepted it. But standing there at that party, I realized they hadn't just underestimated me. They had erased me, and I was done being erased. The hurt from my uncle's comment didn't explode into anger. Instead, it did something far more dangerous. It solidified. The years of quiet frustration and bitter acceptance crystallized into a single cold point of clarity. Lying in bed that night, the party a bad dream in my rearview mirror, I knew I wasn't going to look for receipts to prove them wrong. I didn't need to dig through old emails or bank statements. The evidence wasn't in the past. The receipt was my entire life. For years, I had hidden behind the convenient excuse of my security clearance. "I work in IT for a government contractor," was my standard, boring line. It was technically true, of course, but it was also the perfect gray canvas onto which they could paint their own picture of me as the weird, quiet computer girl. My silence and my vague descriptions gave them the space they needed to build their comfortable narrative. I had been complicit in my own erasure, all in the name of keeping the peace and honoring my non-disclosure agreements. But that night, I decided I was done. I would no longer protect their comfortable delusions at the expense of my own truth. My career wasn't just a job, it was my life's work, and it was important. So I began to gather the real receipts. Not in a box, but in my own mind. I started a mental inventory, laying the truth out piece by piece. They think I fix printers. The reality is, I lead a team that prevents cyber attacks on our nation's power grid. They think I just work with computers. I actually design the encryption protocols used by our intelligence agencies to communicate securely in hostile territories. They imagine my life as a boring desk job, a bland existence in a gray cubicle. The truth is that my desk is often a briefing table in a secure room, presenting risk assessments to generals and cabinet secretaries whose names they only see on the news. Every dismissive joke, every patronizing comment. I held it up against the stark, high-stakes reality of my world. With this clarity came a strange sense of calm. I realized I didn't need to formulate some grand, elaborate plan for revenge. I didn't have to set a trap or engineer a dramatic confrontation. My life was the plan. My reality was the scheme. The best-kept secret was simply the truth. I knew that a major project I had been leading for the past 18 months was about to conclude successfully, and with it would likely come some form of official, public acknowledgement. The confrontation wasn't something I had to build. All I had to do was stop hiding and let it happen. All I had to do was be myself, fully and unapologetically, and wait. They had built my cage out of their own ignorance. But the thing about my job is that I'm an expert at finding hidden doors, and I decided it was time to finally walk through mine. We returned to that frozen moment in my uncle's backyard. The cheerful party music had died out, replaced by a thick, anxious silence. Every eye was fixed on the man in the perfectly tailored black suit, as he strode across the lawn with an unnerving sense of purpose. He wasn't armed, but he carried an authority that was more potent than any weapon. I saw my cousin Kevin's face warp from confusion into a mask of pure annoyance. In his world, there was only one possible explanation for this interruption, that I had somehow staged this, hired an actor to pull focus from his big day. The arrogance of it was almost breathtaking. He truly believed the universe, and by extension me, revolved entirely around him. He couldn't have been more wrong. The agent stopped a respectful 2 feet in front of me, his posture impeccable. He didn't glance at anyone else. The crowd of 50 people might as well have been garden statues. His voice when he spoke was not loud, but it cut through the silence with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, clear and professional. He didn't smile. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Director Elaine Rivers?" he asked. It was phrased as a question, but it wasn't one. It was a summons. That one word, director, landed in the center of the party and detonated. It hung in the air, shimmering with implications that my family couldn't begin to process. Director, not Elaine, the quiet niece, not the girl who is good with computers, and most certainly not the printer fixer. It was a title, heavy with a significance that physically altered the space around me. I saw my Aunt Carol's hand fly to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. I watched the color drain from my Uncle David's face, his celebratory smile slackening into a mask of utter disbelief. In that instant, I could feel 20 years of their narrative, their carefully constructed reality, begin to crack at the foundations. I didn't offer an explanation. I didn't feel the need to. The world they had built was their prison, not mine. I simply gave the agent a short, calm nod. My quiet affirmation seemed to rattle them more than any outburst could have. I was confirming this new reality, without any of the emotional chaos they were used to. The agent in turn nodded back, his expression unchanged. He continued with the same detached professionalism, his words delivering a second more powerful blow that would shatter their world completely. "My apologies for the interruption," he said, his voice steady. "We have a secure video conference established. The president is waiting." If director was a crack in their universe, the president was the asteroid that wiped it out. The chain reaction of shock was immediate and glorious to behold in its silent, unfolding chaos. Kevin's jaw literally fell open. His mouth hung agape, his face a perfect picture of cognitive dissonance, as his brain tried and failed to reconcile the printer fixer with a presidential video conference. His friends, the ones he'd been trying to impress, were no longer looking at him. Their gazes were fixed on me, their expressions a mixture of awe and sudden, intense curiosity. I had become the most interesting person in the room, a position Kevin had never once had to relinquish in his entire life. Then I heard a sputtering, choking sound. It was my Uncle David, who had inhaled a gulp of his celebratory scotch the wrong way. He was doubled over slightly, coughing, his face turning a startling shade of red. He wasn't just choking on his drink, he was choking on the absolute demolition of a worldview he had held for 60 years. The hierarchy of his world, so simple and certain just moments before, had been irrevocably obliterated. The golden child was fool's gold, and the invisible girl... Well, the invisible girl was being summoned by the most powerful man on the planet. I didn't look at any of them. Their panic was their own. I kept my eyes focused on the agent, the single point of calm and order in the middle of their storm. He and I understood the mission. I gave him another small nod. "Thank you," I said, my own voice even. "I'm on my way." As I turned to follow the agent toward the sleek black SUV waiting at the curb, a voice finally broke through the stunned silence. It was my uncle, his voice raspy and laced with a desperation I had never heard before. "Elaine? Director?" he stammered, the two words warring with each other. What president?" I paused at the edge of the lawn and turned to look at him for the first time since this all began. I saw the pleading in his eyes, the desperate need for an explanation, for a way to make it all make sense again. The old me, the girl who craved his approval, would have rushed to reassure him. But she was gone. Instead, I gave him the same gentle, dismissive smile he had given me my entire life. "Don't worry about it, Uncle David," I said softly. "It's just work." The collapse was immediate and total. My simple, dismissive words hit him harder than any accusation ever could. As I walked away, the frantic, hushed whispers erupted behind me like sparks from a fire. Questions, theories, and panicked reassessments filled the air. The entire gravity of the party, the entire universe of my family, had just tilted on its axis. Their son, the golden boy Kevin, had been revealed as a dim bulb, and I, the forgotten planet in the outer orbit, had just become the center of everything. And in the ringing silence of that backyard, as the heavy door of the SUV closed, I didn't feel anger or victory. I just felt quiet. For the first time, I was the one who got to walk away. Inside the insulated cabin of the SUV, the world went silent. The frantic, chaotic energy of the party was instantly replaced by a calm, focused quiet. It felt like coming up for air after being held underwater for 20 years. My focus shifted immediately to the task at hand, a complex, fluid situation that required my full attention. For the next hour there was no family, no history, no drama. There was only the problem, the data, and my team on the other end of the secure line. This was my real world, a place of logic and consequence. And it felt like coming home. After the conference ended and the immediate crisis was managed, I finally allowed myself to check my personal phone. It was a mistake. The screen lit up with a deluge of notifications, dozens of missed calls and a flood of frantic text messages. They were all there. My Uncle David, my Aunt Carol, and even Kevin. The messages weren't apologies, they were demands wrapped in panicked confusion. "Elaine, you need to call us immediately. We had no idea. Why didn't you tell us? What is going on? We deserve an explanation." Every single message was about them, their shock, their confusion, their bruised egos. They saw my life not as something I had built, but as a secret I had kept from them. They were scrambling to recenter themselves in a narrative that had suddenly spun out of their control. There was no pride, only accusation. I read them all, one by one, and felt nothing, just a profound, quiet exhaustion. I held down the power button and watched the screen go dark. A week later, the final assault came in the form of an email. It was a long, rambling letter, a multi-page attempt to rewrite 2 decades of history in a single evening. It was filled with phrases like, "We always knew you had it in you, and we were just trying to protect you from the pressure." They spoke of how proud they would have been, if they'd only known, painting a picture of themselves as loving guardians who had simply been kept in the dark. It was a masterpiece of self-serving revisionism. The internal ledger I had kept for so long was now being audited by the very people who had created it, and they were cooking the books. I saw the email for what it was. Not a bridge, but a cage. A final, desperate attempt to pull me back into their story, to make my success about their validation. I moved my cursor over the archive button and clicked. I didn't even grant it the dignity of the trash folder. 6 months later? It's strange, people talk about starting a new life, but that's not what this feels like. This isn't a new life. It's just my real life, finally lived out in the open, without the need for 2 different versions of myself. I haven't moved or changed jobs. My reality is the same, but now I get to live all of it at once. My work is my element. I'm sitting at a polished mahogany table in a secure briefing room, the seal of my department projected on the screen behind me. My team, a group of the sharpest minds I've ever known, looks at me not with awe or shock, but with simple, professional respect. Here, my title of director isn't a bombshell, it's just a fact. My competence isn't a surprise, it's the baseline expectation. My newfound peace doesn't come from escape, but from integration. I no longer have to be the quiet, awkward niece at family gatherings, carefully editing my life down to a few boring, acceptable sentences. I no longer have to carry the exhausting weight of that invisible girl. The constant, low-grade hum of being underestimated is just gone. It's been replaced by a stillness I never knew was possible. It's the quiet confidence that comes from no longer needing to audition for a role in your own life. I finally understand that their judgment was a noise I had mistaken for an opinion that mattered. The silence it left behind is the most peaceful sound in the world. I still get updates on the family, mostly from my dad, who has been a quiet, if distant, supporter. He told me that for a while my Uncle David and Kevin tried to use me as a form of social currency. They'd be at a dinner or a golf game, and casually try to name-drop me. My niece, the director, it never worked. Their entire world was built on charm and appearances, and when they tried to leverage something of real substance, they didn't know how to hold it. It was like watching a child try to pay for groceries with Monopoly money. The currency was worthless in the real world. They don't have my number anymore. That door is closed, quietly and permanently. My life now is defined by moments they would never understand. I come home to my quiet apartment, the place they probably imagined was so lonely. It's my sanctuary. Tonight, I'm not saving the world or briefing generals. I'm not fixing a printer. I'm just watering a plant, a small fiddle leaf fig that's thriving in the evening sun coming through my window. I'm watching a new leaf slowly unfurl. It's a simple, profound act of nurturing life in a space that is wholly and completely mine, governed by my rules and my values. It's not about fixing something broken, it's about tending to something that is quietly, beautifully growing. This is the peace they could never have given me, and that they can no longer take away. I learned that you can't force people to see your worth. You can only decide that their opinion is no longer the price of admission to your own life. If you've ever had your success minimized by the people who should have been your biggest fans, drop a comment below. I see you.